Hey Axis and Allies players, the Good Captain here. Welcome to video number 9 in my Axis and Allies 1914 series. I've decided to cover both Italy and the United States in a single strategic video. This is because both of these powers are relatively straightforward, and there's just not as much in-depth discussion like there was on the previous strategic videos. We'll start first with Italy. My recommended first turn purchase for Italy is 4 infantry and save 2. And much like France, I think this is always going to be a good purchase based on the overall Entente strategy. And that strategy is holding back the Central Powers forces in the middle of the board, while the British smash the Ottomans and destroy the Central Powers from the south. Before I get into my recommended opening moves, I need to acknowledge that all of the Central Powers have taken their turns, so the board might be a bit messy. What I have set up here is what I feel to be the most competitive Austrian opener. Serbia and Romania have fallen. The Austrians entered Sea Zone 17, suffered no mine hits, and did not engage in combat. The British went ahead and reinforced Sea Zone 17 with a single cruiser. And finally, we'll say that the Ottomans defeated the Russians and pushed their surviving cruiser into Sea Zone 17 and also did not suffer a mine hit. This also assumes that the French have moved into the Atlantic to fight the Germans, as I recommended in the French strategic video. And I've done that intentionally so that I could set up sort of the worst case scenario for Italy's first turn. My final caveat to this is that if the Austrians cleared the minefield and then decided to engage in combat, and then they won that combat, that this actually makes the first Italian turn more simple and less complex. So we'll start first with what to do with the units here on Italy. And it's really quite simple. We're going to push everybody up and into Venice. And when we're done completing this maneuver, we will have 13 infantry and 4 artillery in Venice, with at least 7 infantry and 2 artillery in Tuscany. When it comes to a discussion on the Italian Navy and the condition of Sea Zone 17, things become more complex. In the current board state, the Italian transport will be unable to load any units, as this is now a hostile sea zone. And in this current situation, I would move these 2 Italian pieces into Egypt to reinforce the British, and then of course move the Italian unit in Somaliland into British East Africa. That's off screen. Catastrophic dice and poor play aside, I do feel this is a very common opener that all sides can experience in this game. However, there is a decent chance that another situation could develop. What if the Central Powers were either defeated in naval combat or stayed put in their respective sea zones? If the situation exists where the Austro-Hungarians remained in port, then as recommended in the French strategic video, the French should absolutely activate Albania for the Italians. This will boost the Italian economy by 2 IPCs and make these 3 infantry and artillery available to the Italians on their first turn. And if this is the situation at the top of the Italian turn, then I highly recommend removing all 4 Italian pieces into Sea Zone 17. And you do this by utilizing the French transport. So this particular move would look something like this. The Italian infantry and artillery are going to load onto the Italian transport and then unload into Tuscany. These last 2 Italian infantry are then going to load onto the French transport, and they will unload on the following turn. So not only have you acquired the Albanian army, but you've also relocated a portion of it with 2 more pieces on the way the next turn. The final situation that might develop is where you have a clear sea zone, but Albania is inaccessible for one reason or another. In that case, it might behoove the Italian player to pick up an Italian off of Italy somewhere and activate the Albanians themselves and pick up 2 IPCs. Or they could pick up the army in Libya and transfer it to Tuscany and leave the Albanians to their fate. In any case, one thing I would not do is try to fight the Central Powers fleet with the Italian Navy. Unless the Austrians have a single damaged battleship in this sea zone, I recommend not conducting this attack. And this is for the simple fact that the Central Powers navies have nothing to lose. This is in stark contrast to the Entente position. A slew of bad dice for the Entente can result in the destruction of an unacceptable amount of transports. So when it comes to goals for this power, do your best to preserve the navies you have. We'll now move to a discussion on mid and long-range strategies for this power. In my opinion, the best mid-game goal for Italy is to look for an opportunity to snatch one or both of these 2 territories adjacent to Venice. And the rule I like to use when deciding if I'm going to attack or not attack is to study the counterattack option of my enemy. So just as a brief example here, let's say it's Italian turn 2, and we are looking at potentially snatching up Tyrolia. There are only 2 infantry defending it, so we're very likely to lose only 1 infantry on this attack. So the question then becomes, once we're in this territory with 12 infantry and 4 artillery, what is the attack value of my opponent from both Trieste and Vienna, or Bohemia, if there are Austrians here as well? If when adding up all the pips of the Austrians, you find they have more pips than you do on your defense, then I would withhold the attack. I might even hold back unless I had something in the ballpark of a 12 to 15 point lead on the Austrians. The point is this: if we attack as Italy, we want to do our best to make sure that on average dice, we're pulling more Austrians off the board than we're losing Italians. It is far, far easier for the Austrian and German player to replace their losses than it is for the Italians, just based on the economy. The game effect of this is that it makes the Italians far more brittle and far more prone to bad dice. And for this reason, we really don't want to put ourselves in a position where we might lose more pieces than the Austrians. Again, we're just trying to hold in this area of the board. We're not trying to win. And this dovetails nicely into the long-range goal for this power. And that is to work closely with the French and make sure we hold this area of the board. The French and Italian players should be working very closely together. The French, in fact, can and should be sending at least a couple reinforcements a turn into Venice to make sure this never goes down. This is a natural choke point and needs to be held. And that's pretty much it. There's a late game option of using the Italian transport to enter Sea Zone 20 or 21, that's to go through the Turkish Straits, and pick up one of the 3 IPC value territories that border those sea zones. And if you're feeling reckless or bold, you can do that. It's just not necessary. So after we place our 4 infantry in Rome, we will collect 14 or 16 IPCs, depending on if Albania was activated or not. Combined with the 2 left over, we're set to go for Italian round 2. We'll now move to a discussion on the United States. The United States is the final power to take their turn in 1914. And due to their geography and their neutrality, the strategic video for the United States is going to be quite a bit different than the others. My recommended first turn build is not to build anything at all, but to save those 20 IPCs. I also recommend not making any purchase on game turn 2. And the reason I recommend this is because of the movement restrictions for US pieces. Their land units cannot move outside of the United States, they can't even load onto transports, and their naval units are not allowed to engage in combat unless they are engaged first. Saving your money like this retains financial flexibility. You can adjust your purchase according to what is going on the board at the end of game turn 3. And if the Central Powers Navy was overly successful, it prevents the ability of the CP to destroy any of your transport builds in the first 3 turns. At any rate, whether you agree with this saving of money or not, I believe that by the end of turn 3, the United States should purchase 6 transports, 1 artillery, 2 infantry, and 1 fighter. After this expenditure, we'll still have 8 IPCs that we're going to save for round 4. Let's go ahead and set these pieces to the side and take USA turn 3. During the movement phase, I would move both the cruiser and battleship to Sea Zone 14. And this is just to bring our naval assets closer to bear. It's not likely they'll be needed, but if they are for whatever reason, they're now closer to lend support on the turn that we actually enter the war. We'll go ahead and place our units. And when all is said and done, we have 8 infantry, 3 artillery, and 1 fighter that will be loaded up onto the 6 transports that we built. And on game turn 4, our first target is going to be Spain. At the top of game turn 4, we have 28 IPCs, and our purchase is going to be 4 infantry and 2 more transports. We'll also be saving 4 IPCs for next turn. Let's go ahead and set all that to the side. During the movement phase, we're going to move the entire army into Spain and attack it. Depending on if the Spanish artillery is successful in destroying one of the American infantry during the onshore bombardment, there's something like a 20 to 22% chance that the Americans clear Spain in the first round. In other words, it's totally fine if this takes 2 turns to clear. In all likelihood, we're going to destroy 5 or 6 pieces, and we'll take at least 4 in return. At the end of game turn 4, we're going to place our 4 infantry and 2 transports, collect our 20 IPCs, and combined with the 4 we saved from last turn, our next turn purchase is going to be 8 infantry, and that's going to be our build for the rest of the game. Because on game turn 5, after Spain is secured, we're going to be collecting 24 every turn as the USA. On game turn 5, we'll move these 4 infantry into Spain, and we'll move 4 transports back to the East Coast. Place our 8 infantry build, and from now until the end of the game, we're not going to even have to move these transports. We're just going to flip 8 infantry into Spain. Every turn, the units in Spain will push into Marseille, and from Marseille, these American infantry units will go either north into France or east into Italy. And the purpose of American units in this game is to act as meat shields for both the Italian army and the French army. Once the French or Italians make an advance, the Americans move in behind them, and then if the CP decides to counterattack, they will be the first units selected as hits. They will be meat shields that protect and preserve the Italian and French army. And all the while they're doing this, the Americans will be collecting 24 every turn, purchasing 8 infantry every turn, shucking over 8 infantry into Spain, and walking them towards the front. When it comes to alternative methods or playing styles with the Americans, those can be done, but the most guaranteed way to help bury the Central Powers is this highly economical shuck push of infantry that end up being used as meat shields out on the West Front and Italian fronts. The US power is either a logistician's dream or nightmare. The way I run it is maximum brute efficiency. Everything from the strategy to the purchase to the amount of IPCs we collected each turn is geared towards maximizing the amount of pieces sent to the areas that are most in need. That's all I have to say about the US, and this concludes my strategic videos. I'm going to close this series with a 10th part that will hopefully answer the question of, is Axis and Allies 1914 balanced? Hope to see you in the next and final video. Thanks for watching this. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.